care. But anyway, let's talk about the history behind the 400. So, in the decades following the Civil War, the population of NYC grew almost exponentially, and the immigrants of the wealthy arrivals from the Midwestern U.S. began challenging dominance in the old in New York establishment. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. I am so excited because I am trying to get some episodes done because I have a special one I want to get done for Christmas. But anyway, if you're new down the rabbit hole, we talk about different topics such as superstitions, paranormal activity, urban legends, history, weird history, people of history, and many topics, and everything else. So if that's something you're into, please hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe, help a girl out. Um, Today, we're going last time I talked about the Astor family. Now I want to talk about something from that started in the Astor family. Um, and it is the origin behind it. Now you might have seen. Now the Gilded Age was possibly one of my favorite times in history. So was the Victorian era. I'm not gonna lie. But also just want to say real quick, I have been watching Kylie Kelsey's new podcast, and I love it, love it, love it. So I'm very excited for that one. Now here's the thing: I don't do NFL football. But because it's gotten way too political, and for y'all, please don't comment anything political because this podcast isn't meant for that. I'm just saying that. But I am a college football girl. I am a football girly at heart, though. I will say that. I grew up in Alabama. You either were Alabama or Auburn, so you had to pick a team. Unless you would move to Alabama from a different state, then that was about it. But yeah, but I live here in Tennessee now. But I just wanted to add that in real quick. Probably unnecessary. You're thinking, why the hell is she going on about this, right? Now I'm trying to talk louder and more clearer for some of y'all. Um, I do read the comments, so I just want y'all to know that. But I want to say Merry Christmas as well before I jump into it. But today I want to talk about the 400. So why did I not talk about this with the Astor family? I feel like the 400 was a episode that needed to be in itself, honestly, because I do have another famous family lined up. I can't remember which one, if it's the Carnegie family or the whichever family it was. Anyway, what was the 400, you're probably wondering? Well, the 400 was a list of New York society during the Gilded Age, which was a group led by Caroline Smorton Astor, the Mrs. Astor for many years, and it is rumored that her son and daughter-in-law could not handle her being the only Mrs. Astor, so that's when they left to go to the UK. Now, after her death, her role in society was filled by three women: Mammy Fish, Teresa Fair Aldrich, and Alva Belmont, known as the Triumvirate of American Society. And on February 16, 1892, the New York Times would publish the official list of those included in the 400 as dictated by writer social arbitrator Ward McAllister. Now, Astor's friends and confident, and in response to the list proved by others, that by after years of clamoring by the press to those who was on it. So this also period also correlates in time with the Dollar Princess. I just want to add that to it because I love talking about the princesses and all of that. So I've talked about the Dollar Princess if you want to go check it out. Jenny Jerome was possibly one of my favorite. I also found that I really don't like Nancy Astor. I don't. The more I did my research on her, the more I did not like her. She was like, yes, judge me all you want. I don't really care. But anyway, let's talk about the history behind the 400. So, in the decades following the Civil War, the population of NYC grew almost exponentially, and the immigrants of the wealthy arrivals from the Midwestern U.S. began challenging dominance in the old in New York establishment. It was aided by McAllister, Astor, and attempted to codify proper behavior and etiquette, as well as determine who was acceptable among the arrestees as a champion of old money and tradition. Here's the thing. I'm from the South. Am I a Southern Belle? God, no. I am as graceful as a jellyfish. My sting can burn, but I was raised on that Southern sass. Now the New York etiquette and all that, that is completely different. Could not survive it. But anyway, this is reportedly when Warden McAllister coined the phrase the 400 by declaring there was only 400 people in the fashionable New York society. And according to him, this was the number of people in New York who really mattered and the people who felt at ease in ballrooms in high society. It is also believed that this was the number of people that could fit um, in the Astor dining ballroom and everything. Now, in 1888, he told the New York Tribune, if you go outside that number, he warned, you strike people who are either not at ease in the ballroom or else making people not at ease. Now, while the number 400 has probably been linked to the capacity of Caroline Astor's ballroom at Lawrence Brownstone home on 355th Avenue and East 34th Street, today the site of the Empire State Building, the exact origins remain unknown. And there were other lists in New York around the same time that were necessitized the maximum capacity of 400, including the Monaco's restaurant of the local cotillion dances that may have contributed to a particular sum of the 400. So what about this? So there is a February 1892 list, and it has been wrote that the Snobbish Society schoolmaster, uh, Ward McAllister, as in, but telling Uncle Sam that he must imitate an English snob of the 19th century, and he will never be a gentleman. Okay, now in response to competing for the list names in the purported members of New York Society, published in New York World that insisted on New York Society. In fact, it was made up of only 150 people. And everything in McAllister wrote during the times that the article was giving the paper the official list, which was on February 18th, 1892, in the quoted McAllister stating that the so-called 400 has not only been down or dwindled to 150 times, the nonsense, don't you dare, printed to the effect in the world that some people have made bad impressions and would grow to reflect badly against him. You understand. That list of names, you understand, printed on Sunday did not come from me, don't you see? It is unauthorized, don't you see? But it is accurate as far as it goes. You understand. Anyway, um, it is it is incomplete and does justice, and you understand my many eligible billionaires stink leaving out such names known as Chauncey M. Defoe, General Alexander S. Webb, Mr. and Mrs. Edward Cooper, Mr. and Mrs. Luther Kazas, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Gillette. I talked about Gillette, so you can go back and check that episode out. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Mrs. Green, and many others. Don't you understand? It's absurd and senseless. He also goes on to say, let me explain, don't you know? There are 3 dinner places, don't you know, during the season, and the invitations, don't you see, are issued in different ladies and gentlemen each time. Do you remember? So at each dinner, you know, are only 150 of each of the highest set. Don't you know? So during the season, I feel like I said don't you know a lot, trying to quote this guy. But anyway, wait a moment. I will give you the correct list, don't you know, of the people who formed what is now known as the 400 and who don't don't you understand is authorized reliable and don't you know it's the correct list. Now the list is reported to be included to the creme de la creme of New York society, consisted largely of bankers, New York lawyers, brokers, real estate men, railroaders, and one editor, Paul Dana of the New York Sun, one publisher, one artist, 2 architects, and it also included a mix of knobs and swells. Now, Knopf. Well, that comes from old money, and that includes the Astors and the Gillettes, the Livingston, the Van Zayars, and what about swells? You're probably wondering, where the hell does that come from? Well, the swells were representatives of the nouveau rich, the new money, whom Astor felt begrudgingly were able to partake in polite society, best personified by the Vanderbilt family. So I think it's needless to say how she felt about the Vanderbilts. I'm just assuming. So what about the criticism and backlash? Well, after he released the names of the 400 in the New York Times, there were many significant backlash, both against the idea of the definitive acceptable society and McAllister himself. Now, the society dubbed Mr. McAllister, in combination with the memoirs of the 1890 entitled Society as I Have Found It, and it further ostracized him as old guard, who valued their privacy in the era of leaders and equivalent moderns, movie stars, and everything else. Now, in 2009, the Museum of the City of New York compiled its own list of the New York City 400 and the 400 movers and shakers who made a difference in the 400 years of New York City, including Henry Hudson, who arrived in 1609. McAllister said that the only person of the original 400 to make the museum's list. So, besides the far fewer 400, his McAllister's list um, abounded the inaccuracies, names, and misspelled the incomplete of many spouses, including although many were dead, and the rules of the time dictated that only the oldest unmarried daughter of a family carried the title Miss, with no given name, but he regularly ignored this rule. Could you survive the 400? Like, could you honestly survive being in the Gilded Age? Honestly, I don't think I could. Like I said, I'm from the South, so and I come from no money, so I'm putting that one out there now. But let's see. Let's see if we can find some Gilded Age rituals. Um, but here are some Gilded Age rituals. Mourning. So, a public display of grief that was a way to show social status and respectability. Mourning rituals included wearing black. I wear black all the time. Open casket viewings and have bespoke clothing made. Okay, so here's the thing. Anyone who knows me knows I tell this story, but you're gonna think it's weird. But I have this. I really want Pop Goes to Weasel to be playing at my funeral, a closed casket. Because when I was a kid, my biggest fear was the casket was gonna pop open, or if it was an open casket, somebody was gonna sit up. I was also the kid that my grandparents had to tell that if you step on somebody's grave, then they will pull you under. As a kid, you believed it. You're probably thinking, what the hell is she going on about now? Anyway, what's another ritual? Well, dressing for dinner. This is a formal yet modest dress code that was required for a dinner, which was a social function as much as a meal. And adequate books detail that the appropriate tape for the table and hostess should not outshine her guest. Now, debutante balls. This is when young women attended balls and parties after they were out in society, which was usually around the age of 18, 20, and they were often chaperoned by an older male relative. So, there was the New Year's celebrations, and this was a wealthy celebrated with lavish receptions, while the middle and working classes celebrated in cafes, dance halls, champagnes, while reserved for the elite and now associated with the social status and prosperity. So, there was also, believe it or not, animal themed balls, which was when the elite threw extravagant balls with animal themes such as the horse ball and the dog ball. And there's family portraits when you would sit in a family portrait was a sign of wealth, especially if the portrait was done by a famous artist. Then there was the dinner parties, and this was when Gilded Age dinner parties were extravagant and involved many courses and formal tableside. So here's what I want to know: what was some Gilded Age etiquette? Are y'all excited for this one? I know I am. Now we're going to just go to the rabbit hole. But here are some Gilded Age etiquette. Dinner party etiquette. So, dinner guests arrive on time, usually between 7:30 and 8:30. The hostess greeted guests and led them to the parlor before dinner. Men wore black pants, a waistcoat, jacket, white tie, shirts, and gloves, while women wore formal evening dresses. Dinner attire was formal but modest, and the host dressed never more elaborate than her guest. What about social etiquette? Well, conversations were quiet and decorous, except at sporting events and a circus. And it was considered gosh, sorry, I had to call attention to oneself at one's party. Attendees mix and with dinners and everything else in the courtship etiquette. Women were expected to tread the fine line when courting men. They should not be too eager to receive a gentleman's attention, but they should not be not so reserved and discourage them. And what is some other etiquette, you may ask? Well, people generally wrote that and did most of the things their right hand because they were left-handed. Their left-handedness was not well liked, and etiquette books were proper and provided advice on many topics, including cooking, dinner parties, caring for infants, and the sick. Okay, we truly went down the rabbit hole for there. Could you survive being in the Gilded Age? And you think you could be a member of the 400? I'm gonna say me. No, I could not. I am way too much from the South and way too far to be called a Southern Belle. But I was raised by my grandparents who taught me Southern hospitality and how to sugarcoat things with laced with a smile. All right, y'all. That is it for this episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all